1943.
This is Peter DeBaptiste with Thornbury Township's Oral History Project. I am here today on November 12th at Sweetwater in Glen Mills to talk to Clifford E. DeBaptiste about his experiences in Thornbury and Westchester. Could you start, please, to tell us a little bit about your own history? When did you come to Westchester and the area?
Actually, I came to Westchester twice. I came to Westchester in 1943. I commuted back and forth to Philadelphia to go to school. And then I came back again in 1953. Actually, I opened business up in 1954. That would give me time to be in the 40s to visit one of Uncle Sam's excursions in the Philippines, and then in the 50s to also volunteer for the Korean War. But now in 43, when I came, one of the most prominent families that I met, and, 18 or 19 years old, we just accepted them as just people, because one of the, two of the children were about my age. Cheyney Derry was the sister of Lawrence Derry, who was the builder. Now, the Derry family, each one of them were unique in their own way. Joe was educator, and he became a principal down, I think it was in Morton, but I'll leave that up to you to decide where that was. But he was also the first African American that was also president of Kiwanis Club. I remember that. He said he was a member of the Kiwanis Club. And then, of course, their father, Sam Derry, he was quite a tall, stately figure, but he was quiet. But you could see that him and his wife, they were kind of dominant in their way, and you never heard them raise a voice. And they lived in an old farmhouse. And not too long ago, I didn't see any changes in that farmhouse. They sort of kept that way. Now, Lawrence, as a builder, he started acquiring land all around that way. And then he acquired the land a little bit to the south of him, where he put up a number of houses, and his houses were unique. He only built things one way, and that was quality. That's all. And he was a stonemason. He was really a stonemason. In fact, most of his activity was doing all the stonework 7 days a week for DuPont. And all the stonework that you see around all the DuPonts in Delaware, it was Lawrence Derry's work. And I know he taught a couple of people that. And I've seen their work, but it's not like Lawrence's work. They said work for Lawrence Derry, and they had some fundamentals. But somehow or another, it's either like somebody playing an organ. Two people can play the same piece, but you don't have to look to see who's playing which piece, because he was the epitome of perfection. Somehow or another, Lawrence and Macy became a team. And in those days, if whatever they said to a bank or anything, not with all the paperwork you have to do then, now you have to do, it was done. My experience in later years when I came back was I wanted to build a funeral home, and I was a friend of them, so I met them as soon as I came back in the 50s. And I used to talk about them all the time, and I used to always, because Jane and I were really, really good friends. She went to Cheyney University too. It was called Cheyney State Teachers College at that time. But we would talk in the 50s, and we would say, I would say, brother's going to build me a funeral home. And somehow or another, I guess he heard it a number of times, because he didn't have no conversation. Very quiet man. Until one day, he called me aside, and he said, building you a funeral home? And I got all excited and said, yes. He said, I'll never build you a funeral home because you could never afford me to build you a funeral home. Well, I'm not sure if because what he told the truth was right, although he said it was right, but he was letting me know that I couldn't afford him. But that part I knew was right, So I really didn't say anything, but well, I'll get back to that part of the story. Now, it was a fellow that lived with the house. You very seldom see him. They call him Uncle William. Uncle William, the story goes, he, before breakfast, or the first thing in the morning he did, he read the stock market. He was considered to be very wealthy, but he lived with them. I'm not sure he was related to somebody. I don't know, Mrs. Derry, I'm talking about the grandparent, the father, or Sam, who was his father of Lawrence and Joe, or what. But they always had this mystique about him that he read the stock market, and from all accounts, he done extremely well. And then that was when I came back, was probably one of the first funerals that I had from the Derry family, because when he died, they decided to call me. But now, and coming back, Cheyney and I picked up our relationship, which we had in the 40s, because in the 40s, if you were correct, before I went overseas, nobody really had any money. And we used to entertain each other by everybody coming together. And you didn't really want to be tagged with anybody, because you couldn't afford to take them to movies and say, oh yeah, those two are going together. You know, you stayed away from that, you know. But we had wonderful times together. Now, we visited Cheyney. Sometimes we could.
Cheyney University?
Yeah, the school. Yeah. When we visited them, we did one or two things. You either had to walk from the train station back up to the college, or walk from Westchester to Cheyney. And there was a little difference, but not too much. But so most of our time was we walked from Westchester to Cheyney because, oh, I forgot, I think it was 50 cents or something to drive. We didn't have that kind of money, you know, in those days, you know. But that's where now Jane later on became a school teacher, and she taught at Stetson School. Joe, of course, I told you about him. He became a principal, and he became head of the Kiwanis Club, and I'm quite sure it was Morton or one of those little communities down that way. Lawrence was a very prominent builder with Stacy Macy Stanford as his architect. And then to get back why I say they were one or two, because one day Lawrence said to me, this was my second time back, and I'm in business now. He said, I got a phone call, and he said, come out to the house. But, you know, well, you know, I'm a funeral director, you know, well, come out to the house. And I went out to the house, and when I went into the house, he had a fellow who was, it's called his foreman, and they were in the front room. Now, Lawrence was a very conservative person, but he had a beautiful house. It was well done, excellent kept, but he had a unit heater, one heater in the house, in the front room, you know, with a grate. No modern heating system at all. That was the heating system. And around the floor there, he had all these plans and things. He said, okay, I'm going to build you a funeral home. I'm going to add up all my expenses, and I'm going to put 10% on top of it. And Jack, you're to watch this project. And he walked out the room. I was dismissed, really, without even saying, well, that's what I want, that's what I want you to do. You know, nothing like that. But I guess I had said enough that he's going to build me a funeral home. He didn't know how to have any money. And the worst part, here's the part that I'm trying to really get over. He tore off a piece of paper. He wrote his name on it, and he wrote Macy Stanford's name on it, and said, take it up to the Chester County Federal Savings. And, you know, I don't know anything about what people do. I know now. And I took it up there, and before I handed it to the fellow, I said to him, I want I want to borrow some money because I want to build a funeral home. And so, like, you know, who are you? You know, and I gave him that little piece of paper. He said, oh, yeah, okay, consider it done. We'll work it out. Now, you know, nowadays, I mean, you have to have more disclaimers. You got to, oh man.
It's a different time, indeed.
Oh, yeah, but that's all you needed from those two. And I'd almost say, except for some of the technical things, those two, they were still living, you know, they could do the same thing. Their reputation was that impeccable.
The Derry family, we know from everything you said and from what we know, just history in the community, a very prominent family and still live in the community. But there were other African-American families as well. Do you remember any of
Yeah,
those?
sure. The church considers just about 5 families. Besides the Derrys, of course, there was the Stills, and then there was the Browns, and there was the Pounceys, and there was 1 or 2 other families. But some, of course, intermarried, you know, so that they became Derrys or they became Browns or they became that. And they all were, now you take Still. Still was a professor at Morgan State. And he came home, you know, he was in church every Sunday morning. He came back to Thornbury every Sunday morning to go to church. The Browns were also members of that particular church. I remember that when they first had their little burials in the cemetery. Now, Lawrence knew where everybody was buried. He knew exactly where they were. And when we had funerals there, he knew who was allowed in the cemetery and who wasn't allowed in the cemetery. And he knew where they were going to go in the cemetery. So anytime I had a service out there, it wasn't that abundantly because it was a small community, small cemetery. I would always contact him, and then he would go and mark off the grave and say, you know, this is where the body would go. Well, now Samuel, which was their father, he was really from the old school. Because when I met him in 43, and I told him what some of my thoughts were, and he said, well, we don't need no more, you know, we don't need more funeral. He said, my friend Hunt from Chester, I grew up with them, and another name from media said DeBaptiste. He said, we were all good friends. Well, Sam called me up one day. DeBaptiste died in '56, and DeBaptiste and Hunt had this thing, because they were old-time Afro-American funeral homes, one in Media and one in Chester. But they were just old-time, but they got along very well. They had a thing that whoever died first, the other would embalm them. They died within 2 weeks of each other. So one did embalm and one didn't embalm them. But I know that he called me up one day, Sam called me one day and said, can you come out to the house? And that's strange, you know, because how do you get no telephone calls from him? So I went out to the house, it must have been around 56, 57. And he said to me, you know, because he's seen me around a lot, and that would be his granddaughter. And he said, how long did it take you to embalm a body? No, that wasn't the first question, no. He said, I want to get my wife just passed. She did. I came out, you know, the old car, whatever I had, and I said, okay. He said, now, I want you to embalm her right here in the house. And that's real old school. And I had technical knowledge of how to do it. I think I had a big problem out of that. But I didn't want to do it. He got in the house. So then he fooled around. And I said something very lucky, just lucky. It wasn't nothing profound. It was nothing scientific. But I did say to him, because he had an old house, he had a old well outside. I said, one of the reasons they don't do that anymore is because we don't want to contaminate anybody's water. So I just said that, which is true. And that, he said, okay. How long did it take to embalm my body? About 2.5 hours. Now, you go to Westchester and back in about 27, 28 minutes, don't you? I said, yeah. He said, you come back the same night. And he had all that up. He says, okay, I want you to have my wife back here at such and such a time. You know, right on. And when I came back, I did what I said I was going to do. When I came back, I didn't let nobody tell me nothing. You know, I said, I got a job to do. And when I came back, he was down the middle of the road with his watch. And I had just made it against the wire, too. And you know, the kids stayed out of that. I didn't get no help from Joe. I didn't get no help from Lawrence. I didn't get help from Isabel. I didn't get help from nobody. I mean, he worked me a one-on-one. And so, you know, we came back and then he said, now we're going to have a viewing at the house. So I brought her, brought her back, had her right there on time, took her upstairs, put her in her bed. And then the day they had the funeral and everything, the day they had the viewing and everything, it was dark too, it got dark. So we put lights up all around this little place, you know, people came from everywhere. But that's the way he wanted to do it. Then when...
How many people would come to such a viewing?
Well, see, the Derry family, everybody came. Yeah. Westchester, Philadelphia, Baltimore, wherever they were, they would come to that. But he insisted that the funeral was going to be in that little church. That's where we went to church. And so that's where he had his wife's funeral, right in that little church. And of course, it didn't bother him at all. You know. Then, like I said, I didn't get no help or to try to do what I wanted to do. I did exactly what he wanted to do, which has been our policy ever since. I'm going to say he set the policy, but he had a lot to do with it. You know, if you want to work for him, you do what he wants you to do. But now, that was probably one of the main things that I had doing with him. And then when somebody else had died in the family, it was talking about the 50s, the new minister had just come there about 3 or 4 days before. His name was Dr. Charles. And Derry built a house for him I think on Isabel Lane, built a house for him. And then he said, well, you know, I've got this funeral and everything. But the Derry family said, he's not going to do the funeral. And Charles didn't understand that. I tried to say, look, I said, you're going to be here. You do what the Derry family is going to say. They said, we want the old preacher who just left a couple of weeks ago, or last week, when the conference changed, you know. His name was H. Cooper. And H. Cooper was a real old country preacher. And he loved doing what he did. And I remember one sermon that he had, and that somebody was messing around with 2 or 3 ladies. And I remember his statement was, he said, I don't know why they have more than one. I hardly can keep up with my wife. And, you know, and she was there, he's shaking her head, right, he can hardly keep up with me, you know. And he used the word, he wanted to say the word chauffeur, but he used the word chauffeur. He said, I get it for a chauffeur, you know. But they liked him. And he said, no. So they told Charles, no, he's going to do the eulogy. And Charles had the nerve to say, no, I'm going to do it. He said, now, somewhere or another, Charles didn't do the eulogy. H. Cooper came in, and he done it. I don't know if they called the bishop. I don't know what they did. But they were strong. And they contributed to the community, too, by their action, by their deeds, and, you know, whatever your values of contribution concerned, they were at the top of it, without any fanfare. Because I see him do a lot of good work, even though he charged me full tilt, but he did a lot of good work, you know, for everybody.